Beginning in the early 1960s, one after another, former Nazi scientists and engineers were targeted for assassination in an Israeli intelligence operation called Operation Damocles. It was brutal, direct, and effective. Former Nazi rocket experts who moved to Egypt suddenly faced mail bombs and drive-by attacks. A prominent arms dealer named Heinz Krug vanished without a trace. At the time, the New York Times reported that Dr. Krug was last seen leaving his Munich office for an appointment, then never seen again. The message was crystal clear. The program to build Egyptian rockets needed to stop. Operation Damocles worked. It terrified the target group and made the idea of working for Egypt a lot less appealing. It also gave Mossad, Israel's intelligence service as named in reports, practice that would show up again decades later. Most recently in Iran, towards the end of Trump's first term, an Iranian nuclear scientist was killed by a remote-controlled, AI-enabled machine gun hidden in the back of a pickup truck on the side of a freeway. According to reports, the AI compensated for the weapon's movement and input delay. When the car rolled by, the operator pressed the button. Initial media reports in Iran guessed at snipers and even a gun battle. To deepen the confusion, the pickup was blown up after the hit. Stories like that get celebrated when they are carried out by services aligned with the United States. They read like spy thrillers, and they are meant to. But what about similar operations on American soil? There are only two possibilities. Either foreign governments are not doing this inside the United States, or they are doing it without detection, or at least without public disclosure. With war in Iran underway, the question has gone mainstream. The White House has been asked about a wave of deaths and disappearances involving scientists. The FBI has confirmed it is looking for connections among multiple cases, while also saying there is no evidence linking them so far. Names in the headlines include a former NASA scientist, Monica Reza, who vanished while hiking, and an anti-gravity researcher, Amy Escridge, whose death in 2022 was ruled a suicide. Others have ties to nuclear research, aerospace programs, and classified projects. Here is the problem. Headlines tend to treat every single case as equally suspicious. That is not a serious way to figure out what is real. So go case by case. Start with Amy Escridge. She died in Huntsville, Alabama on June 11, 2022, at the age of 34 from a gunshot wound to the head. The death was ruled a suicide. Before her death, she claimed she was preparing to present major findings in anti-gravity research and said she needed NASA approval. She launched a website called the Institute for Exotic Science to give a public face to what she described as anti-gravity technology. She also worked with her father's company, Holocron Engineering, which described a triangle anti-gravity craft that did not progress far. Anti-gravity is not an established scientific field, and she had no peer-reviewed papers. A month before her death, according to a UFO investigator named Frank Milbourne, she sent a text warning that if reports said she killed herself, she did not. In interviews years earlier, she described a blacked-out Lexus near her low-income apartment, a man changing plates in front of her, the car tailing her with different plates, even a fake Uber attempt, and break-ins that included rummaging through her underwear drawer. There was no mention of police reports or surveillance footage. Media coverage then muddied the waters even more. Some outlets falsely attributed to journalist Michael Schellenberger a claim that a private aerospace company murdered her. In reality, that claim came from Frank Milbourne, who also said she had been targeted with a directed energy weapon. Milbourne is a British veteran who has promoted other extraordinary stories, including a second-hand account that British forces shot down a non-human craft in the late 1980s. That kind of source makes firm conclusions hard. Now look at a case that clearly deserves more answers. Joshua LeBlanc was a 29-year-old NASA scientist who worked on rockets and nuclear propulsion. Last summer he died in a car crash. Local reports said his family reported him missing. His blue Tesla was tracked by its own data, and it stopped for hours at the Huntsville International Airport before traveling west on back roads. The car crashed in Florence, Alabama, and the body inside was burned beyond recognition, according to family members. His phone, personal belongings, and even his dog were left behind in his apartment. His family believes he may have been abducted from his home. None of that proves an operation, and a Tesla is a strange choice for a murder because of the cameras. But the lack of basic answers is striking. Then there is the disappearance of 68-year-old U.S. Air Force Major General William Neil McCasslin. He had an established scientific and defense career. Reports say he served in senior Pentagon roles involving nuclear science, space research, and defense initiatives. He commanded the Air Force Research Laboratory at New Mexico's Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where Roswell wreckage was rumored to have been shipped, a claim the Air Force has denied. His name appears in the WikiLeaks dump of John Podesta's emails, where former Blink-182 singer Tom DeLonge identified him as an insider on alien information and scheduled a meeting with him and Podesta in 2016. On February 27, he left his Albuquerque home without his phone or glasses. He took his wallet, hiking boots, and a .38 revolver. Before leaving, he spoke to repairmen at the house. His wife went to a doctor's appointment and returned about an hour later to find him gone. In her 911 call, she said he had physical and mental issues with anxiety and short-term memory, and that he had indicated he did not want to live if his condition deteriorated. She believed he did not want to be found. A helicopter with infrared searched, but heat on the mountain overwhelmed the scanner. The simplest explanations include suicide or an accident. Still, what makes this notable is a cluster of similar cases around the same time. In New Mexico, 78-year-old Anthony Chavez, a retired research and development engineer who worked on a dual-axis radiographic hydrodynamic test facility tied to nuclear weapons research, left his home on foot and vanished. His car sat in the driveway. His wallet was left behind. He had been retired since 2017. 3 months later, 48-year-old contractor Stephen Garcia went missing after leaving his Albuquerque home at 9 in the morning carrying only a gun, leaving his wallet and keys. A source said he had a top security clearance at the Kansas City National Security Campus, whose Albuquerque site manufactures most of the non-nuclear components used in weapons. Officials said he might have been a danger to himself. He worked as a property custodian overseeing equipment and assets. Another name is 53-year-old Melissa Saws, an administrative assistant at Los Alamos. She was last seen in June of 2025 getting into her car after shopping. She dropped lunch off for her daughter and said she would work from home. Investigators later found shoes matching hers, and her phone was factory reset. There are countless possible explanations for an administrative assistant's disappearance that have nothing to do with secrets. In Los Angeles County, NASA materials engineer Monica Reza disappeared in June of 2025 while hiking near Mount Waterman. Her companion said they were about 30 feet apart. She smiled and waved, and moments later she was gone. Even with extensive searches, her body has not been found. It is hard to imagine an abduction next to a companion on a trail. The simplest answer is an accident. Then there is a clear homicide. Caltech astrophysicist Carl Grillmeer, renowned for work on dark matter and galactic structures, was shot to death on his front porch in the Antelope Valley. The suspect, identified as 29-year-old Freddie Snyder, was arrested and charged with murder and carjacking. Local reports say he had been arrested months earlier for trespassing on Grillmeer's property while armed with a rifle. No motive has been released. Other names often thrown into lists include Michael David Hicks, a veteran JPL researcher who died in July of 2023, with no cause of death made public. That gives tabloids room to pad the narrative without evidence. A recent deep dive in the magazine Unheard traced how the story spread. It started with a Daily Mail article naming 5 missing scientists, then a website added a 6th, and more names piled on until older cases were treated as fresh and the story reached cable news and the White House briefing room. Meanwhile, something else fuels distrust. Mexican authorities announced a massive meth lab bust, then 2 CIA officers and 2 Mexican officials reportedly died afterward in a car accident. Critics argue that lines like this sound like a cover story, the kind that gets used often enough to raise eyebrows. Here is the bottom line. Some of these cases are almost certainly tragic accidents or suicides. Others deserve serious investigation. Piling every name into one giant theory only hides the ones that most need answers. Without real transparency, bodies pile up, theories multiply, and truth gets buried under sensational headlines. The question is simple. Are these just coincidences, or is something more organized happening in the shadows?